You are now getting ready for bed. Donned in your sleep clothes, you are all comfy with your head nestled on a pillow. You are eager to have a good night's sleep. You may now turn off the light and let us begin our bedtime story. This story is fictional, but mostly based from a historical account. The title of tonight's reading is A Brilliant Plan. The sun had just settled into slumber, and a crescent moon had risen in its place like a lamplight with its soft opal glow. Egypt's plains, brimming with crops, were now like a shadow. A woman with her shawl pulled over her head looked out an open window and strained herself to see whether something outside had stirred. Why was Amram still not home with a midwife yet? She looked down her gray tunic, where her stomach bulged heavy with child. She writhed in pain as another contraction occurred. Water had flowed down her legs just a while back, but it seemed already like an eternity since her husband took to flight after seeing the wet marks on his wife's robe. A young maiden, her long curly hair now released from her veil, ran swiftly to assist her mother to her cot. "Mother, please stay still. Aaron is heating water now, and at any moment Father would be back." Just then Aaron's head bobbed up from the doorway. With a sheepish grin, Miriam's brother, showing a deep dimple on his left cheek, blurted, "I see them coming. They have just crossed the embankment when I looked out the door. Get Mother ready, Miriam," his voice trailed. "You hear that, Mother? It is all going to be okay. Just relax now." Miriam adjusted her carob-colored gown as she sat by the bed. She brushed the older woman's auburn locks, at the same time also rubbed on her protruding abdomen. She gazed with wonder at her mother's dove eyes, with its long lashes wet with tears, while her forehead were damp from sweat also. Though she was in agony, her beauty was like a rose of Sharon in full bloom. Her flushed cheeks, her deep crimson lips and oval-shaped face cohesively presented a rare beauty that made Miriam's heart thump in full admiration. Her reverie was cut short as a crowd suddenly filled the room, and a frenzy of birthing activities then took place. Miriam slid quietly towards the kitchen by the fire so as not to get in the way of her new sibling's delivery. She had stifled the butterflies in her stomach as she anticipated this addition to the family. It was a hard and perilous time to have a child. By order of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, all male babies of the Hebrew tribes were to be killed. She was just grateful that it was Puah who had arrived with her father. Puah was known to fear God and had allowed many Hebrew babies to live, in spite of a stern order by the king to have them murdered at birth. Suddenly there was a soft scream, and then a sound of a baby crying gustily. Miriam ran to the bedroom in haste, just in time to see the umbilical cord of an infant boy getting cut by a sharp flint knife. "Praise be God Almighty!" Jochebed, her hair and face drenched but looking triumphant, then exclaimed. Amram immediately propped up a pillow against the wall where their bed leaned up against, and took his son, who had now been wrapped in a blanket, and presented him to her. He had a proud beam on his face as he encircled his arm on his wife's neck to support her while he looked down to admire his newborn. "My work is done," Puah smiled, and then became somber as she washed her hands on a basin of water that Aaron had provided. "But I don't know how Shipra and I could manage making the same excuse that our women are just too vigorous, they deliver their babies before we arrive. Pharaoh had been very adamant with us lately. I think he's coming up with something to stop our people from growing." She turned towards Amram and Jochebed. "You must think of a plan to keep the baby out of the way of hearing ears and seeing eyes," she warned. For days, Jochebed thought and thought about what Pua had conveyed to them. As she nursed her baby, who was getting rounder and more beautiful as the days passed, she could not imagine him taken from her. She would send a prayer up each time the thought would worry her, and waited until a peace would flood her soul. She always found God's comfort and assurance every single time she did so, and she knew He would bestow wisdom when the time came for them to act, and that He would protect them, for they trusted in Him. One day after her day's work, Jochebed came home to find the baby cooing and smiling from his crib, while Miriam was taking vegetables out of her small basket. "Why is the baby out here, Miriam? It is dangerous." Jochebed took the baby in her arms, kissed him, and opened a lid with holes. She was about to lay him down in a blanket-lined small underground cave when Miriam retorted, "Oh, I had just taken him out from his hiding, as he had just awakened from his nap," she quickly explained, and then continued, "But you know what? While he was sleeping, I rushed down by the river to gather some herbs for the cooking tonight. And guess who I saw?" Miriam's eyes glistened with excitement. "I see you have an interesting story to tell." Jochebed sat down on a stool and took the liberty to cradle her now nearly 3-month-old baby in her arms and nursed him. She was exhausted from working underneath the heat of the sun, but she wanted to caress the baby, for it were only a few hurried moments during the day and night that he could be let out, for if he cried, danger could come upon him. She had been risking their own safety by coming home several times during the day to feed him quickly and slip back to work unnoticed. It was a blessing Miriam was too young yet to be commissioned to work in the fields, and so she looked after her brother when she was not around. Amazingly, their little one was a gentle and happy baby and never seemed to fuss. Miriam went on, "I saw the princess, daughter of Pharaoh, bathing in the Nile with her maids. Oh, she was so lovely, mother. She wore a flowing white gown with a gold sash on her head and waist. She had the most beautiful raven black hair, and her eyes were dark and wide. Her maids brought fans with them, and they were large, with plumes of peacock feathers. I saw her step out of her golden seat, which they had used to carry her before she came down to the waters." Miriam rattled on, completely enamored by the scene she had witnessed. "You are such a storyteller, my Miriam." Jochebed appreciated her daughter's choice of words and clear imagery. All of a sudden, an idea came to her, vivid like the dawn of a new morning. "Wait, Miriam," she interrupted her daughter. "How often do you think she comes to bathe in the river?" Miriam looked up from where she had also sat on a stool to string out the beans. "Well, Kaya, Joel Ben Avram's daughter, told me the princess comes regularly late in the afternoons of the day of the new and full moon to bathe. She lives by the riverfront, so she knows this to be so." Jochebed became excited. "Miriam, will you do me a favor and gather some reeds for me to weave out a basket?" "What for, mother? We have so many. They are even crowding the stable," Miriam reminded. "This is going to be a special basket, Miriam, and tell Aaron to also take extra tar to bring home after his work tomorrow. I will have to inform your father too. I did not see them at work today though, as we women had to gather straw somewhere else." Miriam looked at her mother with a quizzical look on her face. She wondered what Jochebed was up to. The next few days, Jochebed worked tirelessly weaving a large basket. The family didn't know what she was up to, but they sensed an urgency in her project that they respected her silence. Just 13 days after her project had commenced, the skillfully made basket that resembled a little ark stood complete. Just then, Amram and Aaron came into the house like a storm had swept them in. They were both out of breath. Suddenly, their infant boy squealed as he had been awakened from his slumber due to the commotion they brought. They all immediately joined him in a chorus, talking loudly to baffle the sound of his crying, while Mother rushed out to hush the boy. Amram, in short breaths, announced imminent danger. Whisperings around the workers in the palace is that the king had just decreed that after the full moon, all of our male children under 2 years of age will be drowned in the great river. Aaron added while he tried to steady his hands from shaking. Simeon, one of the bricklayers to the new construction at the palace, overheard the guards talking about it. Immediately, Jochebed muttered a prayer and told them about her plan. "Quick, let us rub tar on the basket holes and lay your blankets on it. The day after tomorrow, the full moon will rise," she said urgently, then turned to Miriam. "We will put the baby in this basket and set him on sail. Pray the princess will take her regular baths as you have said, Miriam, and may the Almighty please help us." Miriam realized the wisdom God had bestowed upon her mother, and oh, what a brilliant plan it was! Great hope filled her heart. She was a little petrified her information might be incorrect. But did not God promise He would be faithful to those who trusted in Him? The family worked diligently to make the basket crib as comfortable for their tiny one. After the work, Amram led his family to a prayer vigil for God's protection and guidance to what they had all agreed to do. The day of the full moon soon arrived. Miriam's heart pounded heavily on her chest when they had securely laid the toddler in his woven hamper and closed the lid. She had been commissioned by the rest of the family to follow the baby in the floating bassinet. It was up to God now to lead the child to the direction towards His salvation. The rest of the family went home to intercede, while the young maid followed the delicate crate, watching as it bobbed up and down when the little waves would hit it. The sun was not too blatant that day, and the blue waters of the Nile were as placid, with only a few ripples that broke the water current's slow pace. Birds flew by, frogs croaked, and a few ducks glided near the basket as if to escort it. Miriam watched behind the bushes along the bank until she heard splashes and laughter up ahead. There, amidst the covering of palm leaves, she caught sight of the royal's golden chair, and beyond a ways from shore were women playing in the water. "Hey, look, something is afloat!" An excited pitch got through the air. The princess, wet but still in her full splendor, ordered for her ladies to bring to her what seemed to them like an interesting playboat. "It is quite heavy, my lady," one girl exclaimed. They all tried to reach shore, tugging the interesting object with them, when suddenly they heard a cry of a baby, which seemed to be coming from the woven object. The princess opened the lid and gasped, and took Miriam's brother out from his hiding. "My, what a handsome little boy! He is too adorable!" The princess was obviously well pleased. A robe was immediately wrapped on the princess's drenched form. Just then, Miriam mustered strength to approach them. "Excuse me, Your Highness," she bowed low. "I was just passing by and saw you lift that baby from that basket. Oh, isn't he so beautiful and endearing?" Miriam exaggerated her admiration for the baby, hoping the princess would fall in love with her brother. "Oh yes, he is just a dear. Look at his beady eyes and how round he is, so cuddly and soft." She kissed the male child's forehead. Miriam saw this as the perfect opportunity to involve her mother and connect them back to the baby. So she quickly spoke. "Would you be interested to hire a nursing maid? I know of someone," she offered courteously. The princess looked at Miriam, and then once more at the child now nestled in her embrace, and such compassion filled her being. This must be one of the Hebrew babies, but he is too adorable. Yes, I think I shall adopt him as my son. He will be my treasure, and I shall call him Moses, for I drew him out of the waters. She raised the child up for all to see. "Yes, child, go and fetch the nursing maid," she ordered. And with that, Miriam ran as swiftly to tell her mother that her little brother had been delivered by their faithful God. We have now reached the end of our story. Sleep tight